About a year ago, we were at this very location in Half Moon Bay, and we were with Hunter Newby, and we're with him again. Allied Fiber's your company. You've done a lot of things in the year. You've moved from Florida to Georgia. So why don't we talk a little bit about your progress and the milestones that you have?
Great. Thanks for having me back on the show. So, we've completed our construction from Miami to Atlanta, which is over 730 route miles. We constructed 11 buildings, approximately every 60 miles between Miami and Atlanta. And we've gone fully operational and turned up several customers, announced a lot of big deals, tying into the major submarine cable landing stations in South Florida, and also the Jacksonville submarine cable landings that have built over to us, actually, to our Jacksonville co-location facility. So things have been going really well.
And it is, I failed to mention, it's a carrier-neutral distributed meet-me network, I suppose, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Allied Fiber's in the real estate business, so as we discussed here last year, what we were endeavoring to construct, we've built, and we've announced a lot of different customers. And we're not a carrier ourselves; we're in the real estate business. We provide infrastructure network operators. So, if you look on our website and you look at the announcements with the customers and the press releases we've put out, it's everything from submarine cable systems to local network operators. Even the most recently, Georgia Transmission Corporation, which is a utility company cooperative essentially in middle Georgia, and they've announced that they're connecting to us on a 20-year deal, and they're establishing a presence with us in our colo facilities, 3 of them in Georgia. So it's all coming together. Local access meets global international, meets content, meets mobile, to create a physical layer interconnection point proximity for network connections.
I want to talk a little bit more about this this cooperative of cooperatives, if you will, the Georgia Transmission Corporation. And a lot of these places, they're pretty rural areas, they didn't really have good ways to get to the internet before, right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, most of the networks were created in those areas were sort of homegrown, whether it was the incumbent telephone company or cable company, and in some cases, utility companies had their own independent networks. But for the most part, they were all islands, those independent networks. They had no real direct dark fiber way to connect to the major interconnection hubs in the major cities, such as Miami or even in Jacksonville or certainly in Atlanta. And Allied Fiber provides that bridge, that physical layer thoroughfare for those island networks to connect to us, and then we bring them into the major cities. And also similarly in reverse, we bring major international networks, even domestic networks, content and others, to these places in between the major cities. So where we've created buildings in cities, like Ashburn, Georgia, for example, that now becomes a meet point, or Warner Robins, Georgia, for example, or Fort Pierce, Florida. There are municipal networks and community networks and mobile networks and MSOs and triple play MDU providers that are out there that have only ever had really lit transport and transit provider options, typically only from an incumbent, which is not competitively priced because there really isn't any access. And we've created a physical access point for them to connect into, which is a marketplace. It's a hub, no different than one of the major carrier hotel meet-me rooms, albeit fewer networks to start with. But if you go back to the beginning of those carrier hotels that are defined today, 15 years, 20 years ago, their inception point was just like the inception point of the buildings that we're creating today on the distributed Allied Fiber model.
And a lot of those distribution points are in very rural areas where that mid-mile has been very expensive traditionally.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest problems that everybody talks about, but really nobody does anything about. They think they're going to solve it with legislation or forcing the incumbents to open up their networks, and it's actually quite the opposite. Legislation had to be created, net neutrality, whatever that concept really is about, and it's about control of access, really, at the end of the day. It's not about the internet. It's about network neutrality, and network is really relative to access. So we create these real estate, essentially infrastructure points, where all local networks can build to. And once they get into our facilities, they're free to connect to whomever they want, to do whatever they want. They can directly connect to content providers and peer in our facility with no internet. It's internet protocol, but there's no internet. There's no ISP. There's no third party between the access provider, whether it's fixed line or mobile, to the end user and the content itself. That just didn't exist.
And with 488 fibers or whatever it is, there's a lot of capacity for these people to interconnect with, right?
Yeah, in Florida we built a 528 count cable, Corning fiber, and then we've got 2 ducts between Jacksonville and Atlanta. We populated the first duct with a 216 count And obviously as we move through that, we'll place a second cable. But the buildings are all modular, precast concrete, steel. We've been buying the land now going forward in Georgia, which is great. It's preferable for us. And since they're modular buildings, as they fill up, we just add another one. And a lot of people talk to me and ask me questions about it. Are they data centers, or they assume they're data centers? And they're really meet-me rooms from a traditional sense of interconnection. So core transport is a different power and cooling profile than server environments. We can accommodate servers in our facilities, but certainly as we go forward, higher density data center applications, and there are many, providers of that type of data center infrastructure. And we're here at the IMN conference in Half Moon Bay, so most of the providers of those services are here. I encourage all of them to look at our route maps, look at our KMZs. I encourage the end users, the enterprise customers, schools, hospitals, etc., to talk to those guys and say, look, where can we develop data centers that fit our model, whatever their requirements are, and append that into the Allied Fiber system. Now, of course, we can also do data center space ourselves, but we don't want to just try to control or own that space. We're really about interconnection. So we, again, distributed meet-me room model, which is more physical air interconnection versus the server environment, which is more data center.
Yeah, the service provider really just needs to bring their own optics to get this thing going, and then the data center could be anywhere, right?
Correct. And a lot of enterprises or others that are consumers of that type of compute storage power, they essentially can operate their own quote-unquote network. They don't need necessarily, a network operator, layer 3 provider, or layer 2 provider, even in some cases. There are multiple fiber network operators, dark fiber, in the metros. Municipalities or metro cities, they'll lease dark fiber to an entity who can light it themselves. And if they're afraid, they can go get an equipment vendor to light it and provide NOC services, monitoring, tech support, and what have you. But once they do that and have extended their DMARC into our building, like I said before, they're free to connect to whomever they want to connect to directly, just as it occurs today in the major meet-me rooms and the major carrier hotels around the United States and the whole world.
So what's next? I mean, I know you showed a map, a pretty big map of the United States. What's next? We've gone to Georgia. Where's next?
Well, I'm not shy about sharing the vision. So what we've done and what we've accomplished in the Southeast is fantastic. But we have laid out a roadmap for a ring around the United States to link the submarine cable landing regions. That is our goal. It's to provide physical air neutral thoroughfare through the United States for the global network infrastructure, but providing local access, local network infrastructure. So it's a rewind, play, rinse, repeat kind of model for us. Now everybody gets to look at what we've done. They can look at the video from last year and this one. They can look at all the announcements that we've had with customers between. They can hear it in the customer's own words, what we mean to them. And that's what everyone that's looking at us and what we're going to do next can come to expect us to do in every segment we build. So the next segment we're looking at obviously is Atlanta to Ashburn, Virginia. It's very important, interconnection hub for the internet and all sorts of things. And then from Ashburn to New York City, and then Chicago, and ultimately out west. And it's a multi-year plan. Really it's tied to time, patience, and the capital required to build this infrastructure. There's certainly no lack of a need from the application development perspective and mobile networking, mobile compute. I mean, everybody's got a smarter phone. Right. Everybody wants another app, and they want it to be faster and never go down. That requires infrastructure. Yep. So we're going to build sort of the center line, right, the superstructure, if you will, the thoroughfare, as I said, and allow all the mobile network operators and their backhaul providers and the fixed line networks that are out there to append to us and really open up the thoroughfare, which really drives economic development on a local basis, regional, state basis, and on a national basis. And that's what's next. It's what's happening, just more of it.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and congratulations on achieving all the milestones this year.
Thank you so much.